Hey, Dr. Laurell, it's wonderful to see you again here today. And we're moving right along with navigating midlife metabolism with women. And today we have some questions I'd like to read, and maybe we can have a chat about that and give people some solutions that might help them. And the question is, people are interested in metabolism, and this person's talking about a weight gain fluctuating on a daily basis between 8 and 10 pounds. She tested her cortisol levels. The cortisol levels are high, as we know with stress that happens, also with lack of estrogen. But do we have can we talk about that for a moment together and really maybe give some solutions that would help people that really want to work with their midlife metabolism? Let's focus here on some weight gain issues and how we could maybe offer some suggestions to our group to see how they could benefit from some of our suggestions.
Yes, absolutely. This is such an important issue. I mean, as we go through the menopausal transition and afterwards, it is a common issue for our metabolism to change both as far as cortisol, the stress hormone goes, and also looking at how our body is responding to insulin. These are two really important things that are changing about our metabolism as we age, and it makes sense to give the body a little bit of extra support in those areas.
Well, we had spoken in a previous session when I spoke about how the adrenals, those little glands above our kidneys, how that they make, it's interesting, I love your perspective also, how the adrenal glands supply our estrogen when we go through midlife, one estrogen being one of the hormones. And so really cutting down the first things first, cutting down the stress load is very, very beneficial. But that's not always easy. That's not as easy as let's take some herbs or let's take some remedies, right? And I do know what I've suggested to clients is, of course, I teach meditation and relaxation, but if your cortisol levels are high, I always suggest exercise. Exercise really helps because it burns that off. It helps regulate those levels and the secretion. So exercise is something that I show them as far as, weight bearing, where you're using powerful muscles to do that and cardio. But you mentioned something which exercise would help with too, insulin levels and insulin resistance. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, exercise is like the closest thing we have to the fountain of youth. They say that every minute that we're exercising is pretty much a minute we're adding to our life. And that's because it helps on all of these levels. Yes, helps us deal with stress better, helps our bones stay strong as we age. And yes, it helps us lower our blood sugar in because our muscles use sugar, take glucose out of the blood in a insulin independent manner. So even if our metabolism regarding insulin is starting to be challenged, we can kind of bypass that challenge by staying active and using our muscles.
I never heard of that. That's why I smiled when you said it. The 1 minute, can you repeat that one more time? For every minute we exercise, or how did you say it?
Yeah, I said for every minute we exercise, we're pretty much adding a minute to our life. So it's never a waste of time to exercise. You're getting that time back with healthy longevity.
That's a wonderful solution, and it doesn't really cost anything extra. We'll talk about supplements in another few moments, but that's pretty profound, the exercise movement. And then I go into another phase when I talk about the breath, how we have to keep our parasympathetic nervous system tuned up, and we do that with the basics of breathing. But that requires more effort than someone actually just going out, opening the door, putting on your pair of running shoes or walking shoes, and even just going for a walk. I know,
Absolutely.
yeah, and I know for myself, I had actually had gotten dogs in my early 50s. And maybe that's why I didn't feel any hormonal changes because
Mhm.
I was out walking, and I mean really walking because I had a giant schnauzer. For those that know me, it was nonstop, twice, three times a day.
Yeah.
And it's interesting when they passed on to the Rainbow Bridge, I didn't do as much activity. I mean, I was at the beach every morning at 5 a.m. before I got
Hmm.
there. So you really made a great point there about I didn't know at the time because I wasn't going through that change about the insulin resistance. Now I
Yeah.
understand it because it's a decade later, and I'm able to really feel that. And the exercise is the key. Thanks
Hmm.
for sharing that. And
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So many people will take their dog for a walk, but forget that they need that just as much too.
well, I know you have cats; they don't need to go.
They
But
have gone on hikes with me. So
really,
yes,
you have them trained
yes,
that way.
yes, we have a trail on our property, and just the other day, one of our cats walked the trail with us.
Well, that's great. Well, let me ask you, what if someone, I know people come to me and because this goes hand in hand, and again, because of the glucose, the lack of the glucose uptake, et cetera, et cetera. We won't get into glucose metabolism here, but what happens when you have someone, a client, I have a client, you have a patient, of course, because of your clinical background as a naturopathic physician. What happens when someone's so tired that they just don't have the energy, they're fatigued to exercise? How do we solve that? How do we help them solve the issue with that? I have a solution, but I'd love to hear yours.
Well, yeah, and there can be so many different solutions depending on the case. And I do hear that a lot. You have to
Yeah.
start with those underlying systems because it can be adrenal issues where, a lifetime of stress, their adrenals are struggling to function properly. And sometimes that even goes deeper into mitochondrial health, the energy centers in all of our cells. Or another issue that we'll need to talk about in a future session is thyroid. Our one out of three of my female patients is dealing with a thyroid issue. It's a significant issue. Some people are underdiagnosed, and people will just feel depleted all the time, and until we can get those systems back into balance so that they can have the energy to get out and do basic movement.
Okay, we will talk about that because I did get a question that did come in about thyroid, but we'll save that for the next session. But let's just conclude with the weight gain from the elevated cortisol. So cortisol, again, it's a stress hormone that's released. Maybe it doesn't even you don't even have to feel the stress, but like you just said, which was really amazing, if you've been stressed your whole life, and again, I don't want to say who hasn't in this culture been stressed, whether you're a working mom with children, juggling the whole family, not getting the community support that we once had in our earlier cultures, decades
Yes.
and decades and decades ago, it becomes very stressful. Or if you're a working mom, that's stressful. Or we know what stress is, everyone, right? We're
Yes.
all here together. So, is there a way to counteract that stress? Let's say we've done it for 30 years.
Mhm.
What would you suggest? I know I use herbs all the time.
Yes.
I use herbs to replete my adrenals,
Mhm.
help me replete from a nourishing perspective, not fix. The fix it routine is again
Yes.
fixing because something's wrong, but how about repleting through nourishment? And as you know, my background and my medical training was in nutritional biochemistry. So I'm always thinking of nourishment and repletion.
Mhm.
And that's what I put in my book, The Return to Radiance, with that. But from a clinician's perspective, and when you're dealing with this on a day-to-day basis, what are some of the things that you do to advise people for repleting? I advise based on nutritional protocols, types of foods
Mhm.
to eat. Like people are, overdoing I believe, the protein because they're actually depleting and drying out the system. And that's another whole session, right? But is there something that you could just before we end, just suggest that what some of the suggestions that you might have,
Yeah,
again,
yeah.
depending on your patient, but some
Mhm.
things that you've seen work in the past?
Sure, yeah. I mean, there's several things I do, and sometimes one herb is a better match for a particular patient in a particular case than another. But I do really love the adrenal toning herbs. Like a lot of my female patients respond well to rhodiola, but you're absolutely right about nutrition too. We don't think of basic things like vitamin C, but our adrenals to do their job of uh, making these compounds to keep our body in balance, they need things like vitamin C and B vitamins, whether we're getting them through a diet or sometimes boosting it further with supplements. We have to make sure those basics are covered.
Talking about supplements, people always ask me about supplements. First, and again, gets very deep, but we need to have a really optimal digestive system in order to even assimilate them. And secondly, I choose supplements when I make suggestions. I don't sell supplements, so I send people to get their own, but I make suggestions on whole food supplements. And I do feel at this time, because the food chain, actually the soil, is so depleted of the amino acids that are needed to really inhabit and to inoculate our gut, that I do suggest that people take in the form of, let's say, the B complex, like we spoke about. Vitamin C, I like to do the bioflavonoid combinations, but to really use is in the most natural form they can. But I do feel, and I'd love to know how you feel about this, that supplementation is almost like a given at this point, because even if you buy that apple, I mean, anything, it doesn't even
Mhm.
taste like apples used to taste, which
Mhm.
tells me the taste is very, very important. Because
Right.
people used to ask me about microwaving, and I said, "Does it change the taste?" And they said, "Yes." The microwave is probably not the best thing for. We'll talk. That's an
Mhm.
organic chemistry question, but it really changes the molecular configuration, possibly, of the foods at what we're talking about. So,
Mhm.
as you said, rhodiola. Yeah, we have ashwagandha. I mean, we have lots of things that can really work on that, and people are probably advised to really work with a professional. You can keep trying them, but there is a formula, and formulas usually work, I find, a little bit better, because there's always that underlying, like you say, the foundation diet. And we're in a place right now in the world, and people don't even know what to eat. One week it's paleo diet, the next week it's what is it called? There's so many different names now. High protein, carbohydrates, not carbohydrates, intermittent fasting, which is another whole craze that's going on, because I don't think that it's done in a skillful manner. And so, yeah, I think there's a lot to go here. So if we conclude today, what would we say? What would be your summary for working with cortisol levels? And then I'll comment, and then we'll close this session.
Yes, as you said at the beginning, it can be hard to make the changes in your life to reduce your stress levels, but we do always need to take that inventory and look for the places where we can make those changes. I am always recommending herbs and supplements, but we still have to look at those really fundamental underlying issues and do the work where we can. There are things that we can't change, and we have to acknowledge those, but continue trying to make improvements where we can make those changes.
Well, I'd also like to say, you say you use herbs. Remember, the mind and body are one. So by building the body, that also helps alleviate the stress. Wouldn't you agree on that? I mean, and then working with the mind field, through the meditation, the relaxation, finding the stressors, they both go hand in hand. You can't be working with stress reduction techniques if you're eating a poor diet, because a poor diet creates stress in the body. However, no one ever really feels, it's rare someone comes to me and says, my diet really isn't good. Who would do that to themselves, right? People think their diet is good because that's what they want to feed themselves, but nobody wants to hurt themselves. Some people will say, I'm always eating on the run, etc. They don't sit down, they're always eating out, they don't make home cooked meals. So I guess it's really a combination, again, has all our sessions we always talk about, we're doing a whole body approach here, a holistic, meaning bring everybody back into balance. Your balance blueprint, if you will. That's what I call it. And how do we really do that? So working with a clinician, working with someone like you, working with the herbal preparations and being able to monitor that for your patients, and then working with, say, a coach or someone who can help you in navigating as you go along, that's helpful. And you can also do it yourself. However, you got to be very careful what you see, hear, and read these days, because I don't ever see the
Absolutely.
real complete picture. Well,
Mm-hmm.
it's hard to see.
I
Next
guess
time, yeah,
I I agree. So many things are trying to point you towards a quick fix. So
right.
one size fits all, one issues the cause of all illnesses, and it's never that simple. We're all different with different needs and have to take our uniqueness into account.
And we can end with that, and we'll do a session if you're so willing to do it with us on thyroid, because
Oh, absolutely.
that's a very
Yes.
big one. And until next time, everyone remain calm, as I always say on podcast, consciously aware, living in the moment. See you next time.
Thank you.